Thanks for the correction. Yeah, here we are to get to the real brass tacks of this budget. First question, let's go to Leeds and talk to Paul Stevens.
So I run a home security business across West Yorkshire where we have a van. We're running a diesel van at the moment. We're thinking that when we trade this in, it's going to be for an EVV vehicle, and just wondering what changes have been made to those vehicles, and being high mileage, are there any cost implications for us as a business?
Thank you, Paul. And by the way, you'll see a QR code on the screen. If you scan that, you can follow this conversation now and later on YouTube. Now, what Paul has taken us to is one of the tax rises. EV vehicles are going to face this mileage charge, 3p a mile from April 2028. It's about half that for hybrids. Now, for people like Paul weighing up whether to buy an EV, what the government wants you to realise is that even this level of charge is about half of the amount you pay through fuel duty with petrol and diesel. And to give you the figures behind this, if you're driving 8,500 miles a year, you'll be charged about £255 through this mechanism.
OK, thanks, Chris. Well, our next question has been sent in from Michelle, a mother from Lancashire, who has a question about benefits. Let's take a listen.
In our household, we claim universal credit. We also claim PIP and the limited capability for work element. In the budget, I've not seen anything other than the energy prices that's going to positively impact us as a family. Can you tell me any more? Have I missed something?
Well, we've had loads of questions on this today, and actually budget documents have confirmed that the standard allowance part of universal credit will rise by 6.2%. So that's above inflation by April when it comes to other types of benefits. So we're talking about PIP, carers allowance, job seekers. They will go up by 3.8% also in the spring. But any decisions on big changes to health and disability benefits, they've been parked because actually there are a number of government reviews looking into this, which will report back next year. So more changes could be on the way.
Great. Next, let's go to Lincolnshire, where Sheila Correll is. She's a pensioner in her 80s. She says, I've been concerned about energy prices. I know a lot of people have. And she says, I live fairly frugally, deciding whether to eat or heat my home. How is the government planning to cut down energy bills? Well, Sheila, good question. It's a big anxiety, especially as the cold weather bites. What the government is saying is they're going to lop £150 off your energy bill. How are they suddenly able to do that, you might ask? And the reason is that what you're paying for in your energy bill isn't just energy. There are all these government policy costs, green costs, social costs, and what they're able to do is remove 150 quid's worth of that expense off. Overall, by the way, for those government schemes, an average bill payer is shelling about £256 a year. So, OK, 150 coming off, but still some remaining there.
OK, we're going to Manchester next. Gary, who uses the Motability scheme, has a question. Let's hear what he has to say.
So I'm paralysed from the chest down. From the budget, can you tell me how changes to the Motability scheme for people like me who require certain vehicle specifications to meet our needs?
Thanks for that, Gary. Well, the context to this is 860,000 disabled people rely on a Motability vehicle to work, to attend hospital, to live independently. And what it does, it allows people to lease adaptable cars at a subsidised rate. But we heard from the Chancellor today that luxury vehicles, in her words, so BMWs, Mercedes, will no longer be available on this scheme. And also there are proposals to remove some tax breaks. So big changes on the way there.
Indeed. And now, do you know there are 2.8 million private landlords? We've heard from one, Neil France in Essex.
I have 7 properties currently rented out to families. And what I'd like to know is what will the budget, the implications of the budget have on myself and our rental income over the next 12 months?
Neil, well, not so much over the next 12 months, but starting soon from April 2027, property income from rent will be taxed at a higher rate, 22% for basic and 42% for higher rate. So a big change for those landlords.
OK, time for one last question, because lots of teachers have been in touch today. William from London asks, what is being offered to support schools through a really challenging time? But I think the big story, Chris, for the education sector is it was largely missing from today's budget. There were these small pots of money for libraries and for playgrounds, but there was no real uplift, in major terms for general school funding, leaving many head teachers deeply disappointed. Now, we've had so many questions. We're going to carry on answering them, or try to, on YouTube. So please do get in touch with us.
And if you're with us on YouTube, thank you very much indeed. We're continuing our question and answers, and quite a lot of people have been intrigued about these changes to what's known as the salary sacrifice scheme. A lot of people take part in that because it is a way of surrendering a little bit of your salary and avoiding national insurance. So we've had a question from Sally, who is in West London. Hi, Sally. And don't forget, if you've got questions, there's the QR code. You can scan that, and there's a chat box alongside this conversation where you can add your questions. So Sally in West London says, do the salary sacrifice changes that we've seen in the budget today affect parents trying to reduce their taxable income to access free childcare for working parents? It's a very good question. In fact, it is a very lively debate from the people out in our production office. A few people have asked me about this during the afternoon. Well, let's just go back a bit. So these main changes to salary sacrifice mean that in future, you can't surrender more than £2,000 a year. What you have been able to do so far is, for example, say, look, I don't want to take £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a salary, put it into my pension, for example, or into other benefits. Therefore, the individual employee doesn't have to pay national insurance, and this is important, nor does the employer. That has now changed. So we've gone from a situation where salary sacrifice was unlimited. You could put any amount of your salary into these schemes, to now being capped at this 2,000 level. But within all of that, which in itself is a big enough change, there is this anxiety about what it will mean for government-funded childcare. Because, as we all know, there's a threshold there, and if you're earning above that threshold, you don't qualify for the free childcare. And what a substantial number of people have actually done is they've surrendered part of their salary in order to come below that threshold, which is £100,000 a year for each individual. Now, the question is that going to be stopped as well? And in fact, the government's gone out of its way to put in the budget documents that you can still continue to use salary sacrifice when it comes to reducing your income to make sure that you still qualify for the government-funded childcare. So that's an important matter to raise. So thanks, Sally, for bringing that up. And I know a lot of people have been anxious about that today.
Yeah, because I think, you've got to look at, it just came in September, didn't it, those 30 hours of funded childcare, and that is worth a lot to
it's made a big
parents,
difference to
people with young children. So I think we've had lots of questions on that. So thank you for getting the answers for us and clarifying that, because it's not simple, is it?
It's not simple. And what I think is coming out, a lot of these questions, and keep yours coming in, there's a QR code there, there's the chat box. A lot of people are kind of suspicious, not just of this government, but any government, that there might be hidden implications that weren't spoken about during the budget speech. We all know that the budget document is like 100 pages long. It's going to take a lot of people a lot of time.
And also you've got the budget speech. It's almost like the head. I mean, I know it's an hour plus long, but you have the headlines, don't you? But it's actually the detail that comes out in the days afterwards, as you say. Those pages to go through, and the devil is in the detail for us all to kind of fully understand a lot of the implications and the wider context to all of this. But we've been kind of getting your questions, trying to get down into the nitty-gritty to explain the impact that this will have on people's lives. So one of the big changes today has been the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. And our next question has come from Maisie, a mum of three from Lancashire. Now she's asking, when this will come in and what that will mean for her. And we've had loads of questions on this topic today. It's been described by charities as a landmark move to tackle child poverty. It was widely trailed, wasn't it, by the Chancellor? We were expecting this. What we didn't know is whether she'd abolish it in full or whether there'd be, partial payments or a taper rate. But what she said is, in April, to answer your question, Maisie, it's going to be lifted in full, so abolished completely. And what that means is benefits for larger families will increase on average by £5,310. Now, that is the forecast from the OBR, and it's estimated that will improve the circumstances of more than 500,000 families across the country. All of this, though, it comes at a cost to the Treasury, and to abolish that cap is a political choice from Rachel Reeves. It will cost around £3 billion to do that, which we now know will be offset in part by reforms to the gambling tax. Now, I interviewed the former Chancellor, Gordon Brown, in the summer, and he, since leaving office has set up a series of multi-banks helping vulnerable families. And this was one of his ideas, actually. He said, you can plug that £3 billion gap by taxing online gambling, and it looks like, as we've seen, that Rachel Reeves has listened to some of that guidance.
Sometimes happens, even with politicians, We've got quite a lot of questions coming in on that chat box about electric vehicles. You can see how important this is. We've got somebody saying, what about self-charging hybrid? Do you still have to pay? The answer is yes, but it's going to be half the amount, not 3p, but 1.5. And I suppose, although I'll leave this to motoring experts to get into the detail of, there's a potential kind of consumer tip there, because you've got a hybrid, but you just run it on electric, then that would be quite a good kind of beat around this system. Another question is, how will they charge for electric cars, because we already pay VAT when we're charging the car? Correct. And what was the point of going green? Well, you see, that is the danger now. I mean, it's not a question I can actually answer. It's certainly one for government, because they're having now to achieve some kind of balance where they want us to shift away from petrol and diesel. We've got this cliff edge coming in 2030, which will be the end of new petrol and diesel car sales. So it's quite a stiff mountain to climb to get everybody to take an interest in electric, and from some of the reaction we're getting right now into our chat box, then it's pretty clear that some people will be put off. Some other people on electric cars are saying, look, they're already expensive. Is the government helping people who live in flats and don't have on-street chargers? Yes, there is more help coming on chargers. And don't forget, not contained in the budget, but a few weeks ago, we had an updated list of new EVs where there are grants available to help you buying them. So you can see what the government is trying to do here is to strike that balance between saying, look, we still want to shift people to EVs, but in fairness, EVs use the road just as much as petrol and diesel, and therefore fair's fair, they should be paying as well. And it's turned out to be really the first charge of its kind that is per mile.
But I think, as someone who has recently gone electric and I'm still navigating it, lots of people ask, well, how do you manage it? Is there the infrastructure there? What's it like charging on the road? And certainly in rural areas, that's a big problem, isn't it? Because actually, you have to be able to charge, you have to be able to plan your journey for this to work. And then if, the costs are going up as well, it puts doubts in some people's minds. So loads of questions on that, because I think it's trying to understand what the implications are. I'm just having a look. We'll get loads of questions coming in. One viewer from Facebook has said, what's been done in the budget in the long term to tackle homelessness? And I think this is, looks to the wider context of this budget, because I think, Rachel Reeves was very clear to say, the focus, one of the key aims of this budget was to try and tackle the cost of living crisis. And one thing that I want to point you to, certainly in the days ahead, is the government will be publishing its child poverty strategy. I mean, it's long awaited. It was supposed to be published in the spring. It was then delayed till the autumn, and now we're told we're expecting it very, very soon. And what that should do is set out certainly the long-term plans from government and what they are going to do to tackle child poverty, you know, in some of the most deprived areas of Britain. So we're awaiting further details on that. And what the government will also point to is, you know, as I said earlier about some of the uprating of benefits. So I think 7.5 million people are claiming universal credit, and come April that will be going up above inflation at 6.2%. That was in those budget documents today. That is confirmed. Other benefits will also be going up. And then yesterday we also heard that the minimum wage is going up as well. So that certainly for younger workers, for people in low income jobs, that will have a big impact. But then the key tension here is, as you know from, you know, the consumers you speak to, energy bills are going up, all utility bills are going up, food inflation's going up. So I think even though there is this uprating of benefits and there are these changes for many, many families, I think the margins are still wafer thin.
True, and also from the reaction we're getting, there is some anxiety among some employers about the increase in these wages, especially for the youngest employees, because we all know that there are far too many young people who can't find work and they're not in education either. Now, ISAs, okay, that's perked your ears up. A very, very popular savings vehicle in this country. I was looking at figures earlier, did my homework, about 15 million ISA accounts open, and it's the cash ISAs that are the most attractive. About 10 million of those ISA accounts are cash. We've had a question in saying what happens with the cash ISA, and particularly what happens if you move away from the cash ISA to the stocks and shares. Who decides how all that is invested? Well, very good question indeed. Now, the big issue here, and I'm sure be finding out a lot more about this in coming days, is that the reason that cash ISAs are so popular is, first of all, they're very, very simple. They just protect your interest earnings from any tax liability, and they're risk-free. Now, once you start encouraging people to go to stocks and shares ISAs, that's a completely different territory. And what the government is trying to do is to gently push people towards the stocks and shares ISAs, because, of course, money just stuffed into a bank account isn't doing much good for the wider economy. If it's in stocks and shares, it can be floating around and used by businesses. But who's going to decide where that money goes? Well, there will be a whole range of different products on offer. I think in the next few months, we'll see a lot of advice and information from financial firms talking about the stocks and shares ISAs, because in the industry, they know that these are new and unfamiliar. And a very important thing here that is worth mentioning is that we do now have something called the consumer duty, which means that financial firms should not be putting you into a product that's unsuitable for you. So, in other words, what they're going to have to do is assess your appetite for risk and how long you want your money to be put away into a stocks and shares ISA, because your level of returns will depend on the risk of the fund that you're talking about and how long you want to put the money away. And remember, there is also this very big difference for people over 65s who can continue to put all of their money, all £20,000, into a cash ISA. For everybody else, there is this gentle push towards stocks and shares, but I think everybody in the industry and all consumer advisors will say, look very carefully at the options. Some things you'll be able to decide on the investments in detail yourself. Others will be managed funds where they're pretty hands-off. But all of them, unlike the cash ISAs, involve risk, because these things can go up as well as down.
Thanks for that, Chris. We're getting loads of questions in. I'm just going to read through 4 or 5 of them. So someone on YouTube is asking how some of the changes to benefits will affect families with 2 kids. Another person on YouTube, how would the budget help people on low income like me? We've had a few people also asking, is the disability living allowance going up? And then we've got one more. Another question about carers allowance as well. And then one viewer from YouTube, my family has both adults working full-time. With all the increase in rates, we have very little to no money left each month. what help is there for full-time working families. So loads of different questions there, but it's very much, people who are struggling with the cost of living, bills going up, real question marks about, does the government get it? Do they get what the reality of life is like for many families up and down the country? Now, one thing I would say is really good for you to check out. So the charity Turn to Us has a benefits calculator on their website, and what you can do is you can put all of your circumstances in there, and then it comes out and tells you what you are eligible for, and it also lets you gives you a bit of a guide on how to navigate the system and how to claim things, because you'll know, Chris, one of the big issues is so many benefits go unclaimed, especially pensioners
who are
actually eligible to benefits pension credit that goes unclaimed, and I think it's because often the system is really difficult to navigate. So I'd suggest checking out that benefits calculator. It's a confidential service. You can put your details in there and it will give you tailored guidance, really, to make sure that you are benefiting from the things that you are entitled to. But the government today would point to they're helping working families by things like the minimum wage, by uprating some of those in-work benefits, and also the help on energy bills that you've talked about.
Yeah, the warm home discount, which they've expanded to about 2.7 million people. And I suppose looking at the kind of concerns that are coming in through these questions, it is well worth amplifying what Sarah's saying there, is whatever happens as a result of this budget, it does create a kind of moment where people are thinking about their personal finances, and it's well worth people getting a benefit check. People like Citizens Advice will do that for you. There are all kinds of free websites as well, where you can kind of look at what benefits you might be entitled to. We've heard from Sophie Cox in Oxfordshire. She's wanting to know what's being done about rail fares in the budget. There has been a freeze on regulated rail fares. I mean, it's all gobbledygook and jargon in the train industry, as you probably know, but regulated fares tend to include the big commuter lines, and that is the one that Sophie is talking about, because she comes to London from Didcot Parkway, and it's an expensive journey, that one, and she's a season ticket buyer. So that freeze will actually affect your route, Sophie, and other regulated fares. Regulated fares tend to be the big commuter season tickets, also the peak and off-peak commuter fares. Of course, this is a big thing for people, because the government reckons that about 14% of an average household expenditure is on transport. But of course, Sophie and many other rail users had rather hoped that rail fares would come down, and that staying as they are is really, for them, staying pretty expensive, when many of them say they're not seeing improvements in service standards.
Yeah, and that kind of echoes what I am told. I mean, the viewers will know our job is to go out and speak to people up and down the country to find out, what their concerns are. And I was filming in a school last week, speaking to families there, and, we're trying to get a sense of, what would really help you in the budget, what would you like politicians to do? And I think there was just a sense that food inflation was such a big issue, and what people were saying is, yes, their wages go up, but then all the other costs just go up and up and up and up, and there's a feeling really that people are just doing all they can to kind of get through the week, and that's really what's coming through, I think, in the questions actually. We have another question from Jolie from London. She's written, I run a small manufacturing and design business and have trained up staff members and school leavers. She says, how will the changes announced today work for me? Now, what I think you're asking about, Jolie, is some of those measures that were announced regarding apprenticeships. Now, I'll read you what the Chancellor said. She said there will be funding to make training for apprentices under the age of 25 completely free for small and medium-sized businesses. Now, I think what this is designed to do is to tackle youth unemployment, because nearly 1 million young people are not in work, training, education or employment. They're called NEETs, that kind of strange word to describe that. And I think what this is going to do is to support smaller businesses like yours to be able to bring on apprentices and to, help them. So that's one measure. And then also the government have talked more today about the youth guarantee, which basically is, for 18 to 21-year-olds who have been on universal credit and they've been searching for work over the last 18 months, they will be offered a 6-month paid work placement. So lots of emphasis today on getting young people into work and training. There's still limited detail really on when those schemes will come in, how they will work in practice, and we're getting a lot of questions from businesses like yourself. And again, as I say, devil in the detail. People will be poring over, all those caveats in the budget in the coming days, and hopefully there'll be a bit more clarity.
I'm hoping we've got time for one more, because our chat box has been filling up, and we've had somebody inquiring about the so-called mansion tax, and it would be remiss of us not to mention that, particularly because it has been positioned as a wealth tax, and some people feel, well, it's not always wealthy people that have got a lot of disposable income that live in these expensive houses. It might just be that the values have gone up over the years, particularly in London and the South East. Now, if you haven't caught up with all the details of this basically means that there's going to be a kind of extra council tax for properties valued at more than £2 million. Now, owners of those properties will face a kind of revaluation because at the moment, a strange anomaly is that our ramshackle, frankly, council tax system is based on valuations that happened more than 30 years ago in 1991. So there'll be quite a lot going on behind the scenes on this so-called mansion tax. And it starts at £2,500 extra for properties over 2 million. This starts in April 2028, so it's not coming in immediately, and it'll be interesting to see what the response of the property market is to this, because you can imagine that people are going to find it difficult to sell homes in this category. And this mansion tax goes all the way up to £7,500 for property worth £5 million or more. So there's going to be a lot going on there, a lot of reevaluations. I think there might be quite a lot of appeals when people start saying, well, I don't agree with your valuation. But that's about it from us.
I think we've got through a lot, and thank you to everyone who has sent in your questions. Hopefully we've managed to answer some of them, and also signposted you to where you can get other information in the days ahead.